Peace, family. This is Agent 2020 from Clear Vision with 2020 podcast. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Here, let me explain. First of all, it's free. Secondly, there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Peace, family. Agent 2020. Peace, family. This is your brother, Agent 2020, and you are tuned into a short Clear Vision with Agent 2020 podcast. Now, before we get started, I want to go ahead on and say that this is the 20 spot tonight. It's going to be a brief version of it. Got a few things on my mind I want to speak on, so welcome and sit back. We're going to have a nice little discussion this evening. You are tuned in to Clear Vision with 2020. In this current climate, day and time, information needs to be given clearly. In this case, Clear Vision with 2020 is a podcast for the people, by the people, that does exactly that. Your host keeps an open eye and mind when dealing with any issue at hand. We empower our audience with knowledge. You matter. And here, I use my voice to support and represent the people. The people are the human family who loves truth. Logical thinking and conversation skills are required for communication. News, culture, music, and entertainment with a clear look from a different perspective. Clear Vision with 2020. All right, family, welcome back. Welcome back. So, today, we're going to talk about a young man named Elijah Mcclain. Go look him up. Okay, just Google his name and look at all the information. We're going to talk about a little bit of that tonight. So I want to make a disclaimer, as I always do. Well, usually do in this case. And this would be for fair use. Yeah, family, we got to talk about this, you know what I'm saying? Because this is just getting to the point where it's ridiculous. So let me read off our fair use disclaimer here. All right. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit educational personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. All right. So, Elijah Mcclain. This young brother was pretty much accosted, let's say accosted to the point to where, he probably feared for his life. This was in August of 2019. This is 2021. All right. So August of 2019, this young man was walking home from the store. Somebody made a 911 call. The 911 call stated that this young man looked suspicious. Okay, you can look this up because it's all documented now. So the 911 caller said that a young man was walking up the street. He looked suspicious and he had a mask on. Said it looked like a ski mask, pretty much. And the 911 operator asked if he looked like he was, dangerous. Did he have any weapons? He was like, no, he didn't. But she called the car anyway. So they pulled up on the young man, and within 10 seconds of arriving on the scene, they already had him in some type of physical altercation. They already had been putting their hands on him, already starting. It wasn't no, hey, how you doing? You know, wasn't any conversation at all. Now we're talking about civilization here. That's what we're supposed to be talking about, but we're gonna talk about that here in a minute. So today, September 2nd, 2021, 3 police officers, 2 paramedics were charged, indicted by the grand jury in the death of Elijah Mcclain. Okay. This is the New York Times article that I'm reading right now by Jack Healy. Okay. This was September 1st, 2021. A Colorado grand jury indicted 3 police officers and 2 paramedics in the 2019 death of Elijah Mcclain, a young black man who had been walking home when he was stopped by the police, put into a chokehold, and injected with a powerful anesthetic, ketamine, the Attorney General of Colorado announced on Wednesday. Okay, we're going to stop right there for a second. (2019). When they reported on the case in 2019, it was seen like he was causing a problem, resisting arrest, so on and so forth. Had the back and forth probably with the police officers, and this gave them the justification of the physical altercation with him. But we have what's called police cam footage. And this footage pretty much pushes the whole story out in the open now. There's no longer any speculation. The officers didn't handle the young man correctly. Then after they pretty much scared him into probably having a panic attack, was getting sick, don't know if he had a concussion, if he hit his head when he hit the ground, so on and so forth. Next thing you know, here come the paramedics with the ketamine shot. Or he got the ketamine shot before the paramedics got there. They didn't really do anything to try and resuscitate him. They might have gave him another shot of the same thing, because I think the police usually have that with them, if I'm not mistaken. And the young man ended up dying a couple of days later in the hospital. So, after an independent review of the police footage and 5 million signatures. Y'all heard that correctly. 5 million signatures from the human family stating that this case needs to be reopened. The 5 defendants involved in Mr. Mcclain's death in Aurora, this is the same article, Colorado, just east of Denver, will each face 1 charge of manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide, as well as a variety of assault charges. The 3 Aurora police officers charged in Mr. Mcclain's death are Randy Rodema, Nathan Woodyard, and Jason Rosenblatt, who was fired last year. The paramedics are Jeremy Cooper and Peter Kuchinik of the Aurora Fire Department. The city indicated that the officers and the medics still with the department would be suspended without pay. Now, this next part is kind of interesting that this would be said, because this is particularly how the thinking of the public goes. While it is uncommon for police officers to face criminal charges for on-duty deaths, it is rarer still for firefighters or paramedics to be charged. The indictment, unsealed on Wednesday, accuses the paramedics of failing to follow medical protocols before they injected Mr. Mcclain with ketamine. Mr. Mcclain, 23, was already handcuffed when the medics arrived at the scene, and the indictment says they did not talk to Mr. Mcclain, check his vital signs, or properly monitor him after giving him a powerful drug. An autopsy report by the Adams County coroner said the cause of death was undetermined and that it could have been a result of natural causes, a homicide related to a car toy hold, or an accident. Okay, now that part I didn't mention. They put the young man in a chokehold after they had him on the ground because he wasn't being quote unquote cooperative. And this chokehold is a carotid or carotid hold, rather. Carotid, I'm sorry. So the carotid, your carotid artery, your main blood flow and everything, oxygen and all of that stuff. You cut that artery off long enough, you're going to pass out. So this carotid hold must have had so much of effect on the young man that he started getting sick and throwing up and couldn't get his composure, couldn't get himself together. And the officers were talking around the same time and just basically pretty much putting their story together the way they usually do. And I mean, and this is what they do. They talk about it in a casual way. Well, man, he reached for your gun. So, they're starting to craft the story now. They're starting to craft the incident for their report. Now, let's keep in mind, we're talking about individuals here. We're talking about a mindset and an attitude. A mindset and an attitude of a department that's supposed to be here to serve and protect the people. This does not put all of them under the spotlight. This puts the ones who slipped through the cracks and became what you see right now. This puts the spotlight on them. It's more to the story, a lot more to the story. Because just a couple of hours ago, it was announced that the officer who killed the young man at the traffic stop a week after George Floyd had got murdered by Derek Chauvin, she's being put up on additional charges now. So this brings me to what I like to call a centerpiece or the meat of my conversation tonight, which is pretty much, to me, we're going to call it vindication. Now, and the reason why we're calling it that is because in a system that protects its own, now they're starting to get nervous because they're being held accountable. Now, whether this is a being held accountable to make everything look good for the cameras, make everything look good for the public, like, yeah, we're gonna, we're gonna keep our promise and what we said we were gonna do after George Floyd got killed because we don't want the neighborhoods to blow up over it. That was the excuse that a lot of people were given. Imagine that. The only reason why we get justice is because if we don't get justice, we're going to tear up the neighborhood. Not the fact that you're going to have people who just feel like they'll never be able to be looked at like the rest of the citizens in the country is looked at. Like a year after, this whole COVID thing happened, the Stop Asian Hate crime bill got signed 1 year after. So imagine that we've been here all of this time and everybody's pretty much appropriated almost every single right that our ancestors, on top of, some of our great grandparents, parents, relatives within the last 70 years have fought for. Everybody else gets to enjoy those while they figure out ways to change them so they don't benefit the people who were the ones who put the struggle together in the first place. We brought inequality to the masses of the people through the fact that the black man and woman was treated like they were treated during slavery. So that was the first example. Then once that was over with, then came the other forms of discrimination that had to be fought against. Laws had to be rewritten. I don't think people really understand laws had to be rewritten in order to give a human being who's supposed to be a human being actual rights. Think about that for a minute. Laws had to be changed because we weren't considered people. We were considered property. And since we were no longer under the law of being considered property, then everything else came along with it. Then after that, this is when all of the medical science started being done on people, and they started coming up with these insane concoctions and stories. The main one that really cracks me up is nigritude. Used to think that if they got too close to black people, that our melanin would rub off on them and they would become black. Imagine that. Nigritude. Look that up. It's real. So now that these officers are being held accountable for the things that they've been doing, due to the fact that the grand jury has charged these officers and paramedics with the death of Elijah Mcclain, on top of the officer that was charged with the killing of the young man at the traffic stop. I'm trying to think of what her name is. Look it up real quick. She said she was shooting him with the taser, but instead she ended up shooting him with her gun. Dante writes, that was April of this year. Okay. The officer's name, her name was Kim Potter, 26-year veteran of the police department in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, right next door to where George Floyd got murdered, pretty much. She got some additional charges today. Along with her partner, if I'm not mistaken. And so what I believe we're seeing here is what we would call a vindication. A vindication, and we're looking at a system that is beginning, it looks like they're beginning to hold the guilty party accountable and bringing them before the Justice Department and Lady Justice in this case to bring them to justice. So see, now that these officers are being held accountable, we're going to see the reaction of their families now. We're going to see how they feel. We're going to see if they come and say, are you going to give our people justice? Or are you going to, is this going to be fair, a fair and just trial? Is this going to really be a jury of their peers that they're going to be going in front of? Now, these officers in particular, because they are individuals, this isn't an indictment on everyone, but this should be a wake-up call just to let people know that our lives are going to matter one way or another. We're beyond the Black Lives Matter thing. That started off as a hashtag. That started off as a slogan, basically us saying that our lives matter. And now it's been turned into a so-called organization that doesn't get any good light that it should get. Took 3 words, turned it into a so-called movement, and then at the height of the movement, it turned into something else. So we're beyond the whose lives matter and who doesn't. People are going to start getting held accountable for the outright killing and murder of the Black man and woman in America. And it's time that you get held accountable for that, America. It's time. So we'll be right back after this short break. This is your brother 2020, and this is Clear Vision. Peace, family. We're back. We're back. So, in the terms of vindication, what we're speaking about now is the punishment aspect of it a little bit more. Taking into consideration that it was rarely believed that this stuff was actually happening to us as a people. And now to be able to see it being filmed on camera phones, video cameras, starting with the Rodney King verdict, or the Rodney King beating, pretty much, a new dynamic has taken place now. So from 2012 all the way up to 2021, 2012, 2021, you see how those numbers kind of like interchange, so that's 9 years. 2012 to 2021. 10 years almost. Okay. Since Trayvon being the first statistic, national statistic, the first young male to be taken in this sense by a so-called police officer, which he wasn't. He was a security guard. Wasn't even supposed to be following the young man in the first place. And he didn't get any time at all, period. So from 2012, 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 9 years, almost 10. Okay. A number of black males and females have been killed by police officers, and nothing's been done to them. Now they're holding them accountable. So the beginning of this vindication is the system that we're living in right now is going to start holding one of its most revered individuals accountable for doing something to the ex-slave, the ex-property of the former slave masters and their children. Like I said, we're talking about an attitude and a mindset, okay? We're talking about an attitude and a mindset. It doesn't matter what the genetic makeup or the color of the slave master and their children are. If that's what they were, then that's what they were. Bottom line, period. So, since we're speaking about vindication now, are they going to start going back and holding others accountable for their actions and start charging them with these same charges? Are they going to give them more than 22 years in prison? Are they going to make sure they don't get the opportunity to appeal like most murderers don't? Speaking of how they still got some political prisoners that are pretty much on their deathbed still in prison right now and don't want to let them out. That's another subject we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But I wanted to read a couple of excerpts from Dr. Wesley Muhammad's book. It's entitled Understanding the Assault on the Black Man, Black Manhood, and Black Masculinity. Okay. He published this back in 2017. All right. It's a couple of excerpts from a couple of different chapters. And we're going to pull together exactly why this happened to Elijah and why this happened to Trayvon and why this happened to Freddie Scott, why this happened to Sandra Bland, why this happened to Breonna, why this happened to Ariana, why this happened to Mike Brown, and so on and so forth. Now, it was once said at one time that there was only going to be one man on the planet. This was determined by what we call the dominant society. And this was back then. So we're talking about a mindset and a thinking from the earlier times that we're living in now. Okay. We're talking about the early 20th century towards the end of the 19th century, right after slavery was up and the property had to get set free. There had to be things about the property that had to be said in order for said property to be treated in a way to where the dominant society wouldn't feel threatened. Okay. We're keeping this in this context. We're thinking about this. So the first thing to do was to demasculinize the male as fast as possible. That had started in slavery. So that had been going on already for over 200 years. When you demasculinize a man, you take the man out of the home. So therefore, the home doesn't have any structure. So what happens is there's a rise in what's called black matriarchy. That means a lot of us are being raised by our mothers, and our mothers really want to protect us. So they always have this talk with us about what we should do when we get in trouble, how we should act towards authority, so on and so forth. Don't do this, don't do that, because they'll hurt you. You do this, that might get you hurt. Don't go to the job saying this and that, be respectful, so on and so forth. But they're really saying it because they don't want us to get hurt, because they know that's in their blood that this society has a problem with the black male. Okay. So in order to keep the community at bay, what they had to do was they had to demasculinize the black male outside of the black community. So when you step outside of your area, don't act like you do when you are in your area, because we're going to put you in your place. When you're out here, I'm the only man that's out here. So this targeting of the young black male is what started this whole thing. So there was a study that was done in 1965 by a man named Daniel P. Moynihan, who was the assistant the assistant secretary of labor for President Lyndon B. Johnson's administration. In 1965, he wrote and distributed. This is from Dr. Wesley Muhammad's book, by the way. This is on page 22. He wrote and distributed a strictly in-house, non-public report to the president and his deputies entitled The Negro Family, The Case for National Action. This report was intended to motivate the president and his deputies to launch a massive federal employment and anti-poverty initiative directed at Black Americans. Once the report was released, the government mischief makers wasn't pleased with the report or the conclusions of it. They leaked small quotes torn from their context to the press and the public. A firestorm ensued. Once the already scandalized report was finally released to the public, many, including American feminists, launched a campaign to discredit it and neutralize the report's perspective, candid observations, and thwart its recommendations. Now, I'm going to read a little bit of this report, and this is one of the reasons why they didn't want this to come out, because this gives and this paints a picture of what the system of white supremacy itself has actually done. And this would be a system of Black supremacy, a system of Asian supremacy, a system of Jewish supremacy. If it was anywhere else being done to the same people or other people, it would still be a system of oppression. So we're talking about a system. A system doesn't have actual race or genetic makeup. Whoever the people are that put the system in place are the ones that are responsible for the system. So that's what we're talking about. This on a strictly intellectual level. Like I said, this is clear vision. with 2020. We're talking about you have to bring your thinking cap when you come here. This isn't just about railing on going all off and everything, about all of this. This is about making the actual points and speaking about them, talking about them, having a real conversation about them. Okay. So the report goes, and this is what Moynihan wrote: the racist virus of America still affects us. This was in 1965. Now, keep this in mind. 3 centuries of sometimes unimaginable mistreatment have taken their toll on the Negro people. The harsh fact is that as a group at the present time, in terms of ability to win out in competitions of American life, they are not equal to most of those groups with which they will be competing. Individually, now this is what we talk about all the time. Individually, Negro Americans reach the highest peaks of achievement, but collectively, in the spectrum of American ethnic and religious and regional groups, where some get plenty and some get none, Negroes are among the weakest. It is more difficult for whites to perceive the effects that 3 centuries of exploitation have had on the fabric of Negro society itself. Here, the consequences of the historical injustices done to Negro Americans are silent and hidden from view. So I'm going to stop right there for a second. So what he pretty much did was he summed up what we call white fragility. When he said it's difficult for whites to perceive what 3 centuries of exploitation has had on the fabric of Negro society itself. And that's because somebody didn't really want to talk to y'all about that. So now that we come to this critical race theory thing, which is what they're trying to throw in there now, they want to continue not to talk to you about that. Because, see, if they don't talk to you about that, then you'll continue to exhibit their behavior and the things that they taught you in public. And then you'll pass those on to your children, and you'll keep that little bit of the system going by participating in it unwillingly or unwittingly participating in it. And for anybody that's listening to this, especially if you're a person of color and you don't believe what is said about white supremacy as a system, then my suggestion to you would be to go and look up Brother Neely Fuller. Go listen to him speak about the system itself and tell me if you can recognize anything that he says in your everyday life. Because if you don't understand how the system works, everything else will just confuse you. That's why you have to have a thinking cap when you come to this program. Because we're having an honest talk about this. We're just not going to be arguing back and forth on who makes the best point. We're going to get into the actual meats and bones of this thing. Okay. So I'm going to read one more excerpt from it, and then we're going to move on to the next thing. We're continuing. But here is where the true injury has occurred. Unless the damage is repaired, all the effort to end discrimination and poverty and injustice will come to little. Of the greatest importance, the Negro male became an object of intense hostility, an attitude unquestionably based in some measure on fear, keeping the Negro in his place. Now you see this says his place, not her place. See, her came second. Keeping him in his place was the major thing, because as long as he stayed in his place, you can control the family. If the fear of the breadwinner being taken away from the family that keeps the rest of the family in check. I'm continue. Check this out. Keeping the Negro in his place can be translated as keeping the Negro male in his place. The female was not a threat to anyone. Now look at that. The very essence of the male animal, from the Bantam rooster to the 4-star general, is to strut. Indeed, in the 19th century America, a particular type of exaggerated male boastness almost became a national style. Not for the Negro male. The sassy nigger, quote, in quotes, the sassy nigger was lynched. Now, we fast forward. There's no more sassiness now. It's an actual, you know what I'm saying, anger here. So now the angry young black male is born in the civil rights era. After the killing of a couple of our very important people, very important leaders in our community, the black male got fed up. And when he got fed up and blew up in the ghettos of America, they went to work. They sat down and said, how can we keep this from happening? So in a process of doing that, they came up with a lot of different things that we see today. But the thing that they kept hidden under all of that was the actual fear of the black male, to the point to where they're going to destroy the mind of the black male. In a sense, try to turn it on himself, so he'll destroy himself so we don't have to do it. So they did another study during Nixon's presidency. Richard Nixon was scared of black people. He didn't like black people either. So after this report, the Nixon administration went into action with the war on drugs. The war on drugs started in 1971, 1972, and that was on the black male. And Richard Nixon's chief aide came out and admitted that, basically saying, since we couldn't directly target the people we wanted to, if we criminalize marijuana and criminalize the drugs, put that on the black people, criminalize the heroin, put that on them, criminalize the marijuana and put that on the radical white children, then we'll go to war on the war left as well as the black radical organizations, and we'll all label it as a war on drugs. And at that time, since we were the most active, we were the most heavy targeted. So this brings us to the 1980s and 1990s and Bill Clinton and the crime bill. Now, Hillary went out basically on a tour talking about this bill. And in the sense of that, she called the young black male super predator. And what they would do is they would take a few articles, a few things out of the news that, you know, some horrendous stories, I guess, in a sense, you know, talking about the mindset and the attitude of our people as well, and turned it into a election rally cry to get this crime bill passed. So in the process of labeling us as super predators and saying that, you know, we're this and we're that, and, we're dangerous, that opened up the door for a lot of the stuff that we're seeing today. And since the Minister Farrakhan, has been warning us that we need to pretty much start getting ourselves together, or these fiery serpents, which are angry white people who don't like anybody infringing on their system, but historically hasn't liked the young black male, has been released on the people. So everybody's falling victim to these serpents, not just black males, white males, Asian males. They don't talk about it as much, but we're the primary target, and we have been since the slave patrols. So people need to start putting this history together to start understanding why the system treats young black males like they do, why we have stories like Elijah Mcclain, why we have stories like Dante Wright, why we have stories like Trayvon and Jordan Davis and Mike Brown and everybody else that I mentioned earlier, not to mention the ones we haven't been able to talk about yet. So the vindication is what is going to be the punishment for these officers. Part one of the vindication is just charging them with the crime itself. That's part one. What's going to be the punishment? Is it going to be consistently small numbers, or is it going to be something that is going to be okay? A perfect example, I'm in Anderson, Indiana. They just gave a few months ago, probably about 5-6 months ago, maybe a little bit sooner, they just gave my cousin's son-in-law 87 years for murder, quote unquote, allegedly murdering somebody in the commission of a drug deal. 80 plus years, and he's in his 20s. So we know that that's a death sentence pretty much. But they gave Derek Chauvin 22 years for leaning on somebody's neck blatantly, cutting off his oxygen until he died. So telling me that killing me with a gun would just get you about 50, 60 years. And it's just because you did it, you used a gun to kill me or a knife to kill me, another black male killing another black male, kill anybody else, they're going to give you way more time than that, because it seems to me that somebody is saying that there is a value on this life, but there's really not a value on that one. Nobody should die at all, period. And usually God's rule would be, if you take a life, then you have to give yours in the process. But since we're not there anymore, everybody who gets murdered needs to be held in the same standard. So if you're going to give him 80 some years for the crime of murder with a gun, you should give him the same amount of years for the crime of murder without a gun. It's the same thing. Whether you die by a gunshot, or die by getting choked, or die by the knife, or die by suffocation, however it is, it's the same thing. Murder at the end of the day. So this is just part one of the vindication. And the super predator comment came during a talk she was having. She was talking in 1996. about this. Now, when she called the people super predators, when she called the children that, she had to explain that. Now, putting that type of spotlight on a young black male and labeling him, just the word predator itself is enough, but a super predator, wouldn't that scare you if you had to pull a young black male over? Imagine that every time you pull a young black male over, you just thinking that he gonna kill you. You thinking he's a danger. You're thinking he's a menace to his community. But now you're being held responsible for your actions when you pull these young black males over, or these young black females over, or these elderly black males and females over. Now you're being held accountable for it. Let's see how far the accountability goes. This is your brother, Agent 2020. We will be having some more of these talks here soon. We're going to keep it up. We're going to keep bringing the vision, and we're going to keep trying to keep it clear as possible. Okay, so to all my, clear visionaries out there, I appreciate y'all listening. Share this podcast with your friends. Let them know that this is important for us to have these conversations. All right. Thank you for tuning in. Again, your brother 2020, and this was an episode of Clear Vision with 2020. Peace. Peace, family. This is your brother 2020 from Clear Vision with 2020. And I got a question for you. Have you ever asked yourself, where can I get some truthful, unbiased news that gives me the whole story and doesn't just give me half of it or what somebody wants me to hear? Well, we have a solution for you today. Listen to what I'm saying. We have a solution for you today, and it is called the Final Call newspaper. This is the only independent, black-owned and operated newspaper in the world, and it's published right here out of America. Right here in America. You get this newspaper once a week, and it's going to have articles about everything that you could think of that has to do with Black America and the world. So go to www.finalcalldigital.com. Get your digital edition. It'll go right to your tablet, right to your desktop, right to your mobile phone. All right. This is your brother 2020, and we're out. Peace.